Hi everybody. Today we are going to get started in our geometry unit, and the vocabulary we are going to use today we will be using pretty much throughout the unit and using the vocabulary to solve some problems. So our learning target for today is I can identify lines, rays, and segments to describe real world objects. We actually go beyond that and I introduce a couple more terms that I think that you should know. This is a great diagram to get in your notes. So you might want to just pause and then listen to my explanation. Okay, so the word line it basically is a whole series of points that extends in opposite directions without an end. It's infinity in either direction. This is a geometric diagram of a line. Notice that there are 2 points that we have named on it, but when we write it, we give it a little hat. I'm going to draw a little hat up here because it's very important what kind of hat you put on. So it can either be named line AB, or it doesn't matter if you reverse it because it goes on in either direction, so it could be line BA. Secondly, a ray. A lot of kids like to think of this as a ray of sunshine. It has a starting point, but then that ray of light goes on forever in a direction. That's how they remember ray. Notice the one end point here, and it goes forever in this B direction. So the hat that it wears has just an arrow. Notice you cannot reverse this because there is no arrow pointing this way on A. It cannot possibly be a ray. Where if we went up here and we wanted to name a ray, we could say, well, I'm just going to count this dot as the end point. I could write ray BA if I just wanted to talk about this point to this point, or ray AB if I just wanted to pretend like I'm going to cut off here and name this ray. What I cannot do is add the infinity to this point. A segment does have 2 endpoints. We are talking about this section, AB. We give it a hat that is just a simple line. Again, we could just name that part of this ray. We could name a segment that exists on this ray. We could name a segment that exists on this line. But when we're talking about a segment, we cannot ever make that into a line or a segment. I'm getting kind of technical here, and I'm going to introduce something that you probably won't learn until your geometry class beyond this, and that is the word point is actually one of the undefined terms of geometry, meaning that I cannot physically show you a point. It is kind of an abstract concept. It doesn't have an actual diameter or circumference. It's not 3D. I can't produce an actual point. Even if I were to draw a little dot that has many points in it, because points are so kind of abstract, but all of geometry is based on point, line, and plane, where a point is the smallest of everything. A line is a series of points in infinite directions, just one line of them. A plane is more like a wall, so it's a whole bunch of points all smushed together in a flat surface. And all of them are technically undefined because they are based on the word point. So I thought you'd find that interesting. We go ahead as humans and we name these points, and we do a lot of math using those undefined terms. I use the word plane. Another vocabulary, there's a lot of vocabulary in this one, so I'm going to put this towards the top. Plane, not like an airplane, it's a flat surface that's made up of points that extends in all directions. So I'm going to try to draw one. And it can be any shape like this, and it's on a plane. So if you would slice one width of points and then extend it in all direction, take a cross section of that, that is what a plane is. But the reason we're going to talk about them is if you name two different sets of lines within a plane, they will either be parallel, meaning that they will go on in two directions and never meet. The symbol for that is just two lines parallel like this. We don't turn them to the side or it looks like equal. But notice that these two little lines could go on in either direction and never meet each other. Intersect, that's an easy one because we talk about intersections at the in roads and things like that, and that's where two roads would meet. So right here we see the little plus sign that I've drawn, but that's actually two lines that are intersecting. They meet at this one point in the middle. So right here, this is very similar to what you're going to do in your assignment. If you want to pause me and try to name it with line, ray, or segment, and then use that in words. You could do LRS if you'd like, but you also need to do the technical geometric symbol. Okay, so if you want to pause me or if you want to go through it with me, that's fine. So I'm looking at number 1, and I see that it has one endpoint. It goes forever there. And so I'm going to call it a ray, and I need to start with the endpoint. So I need to name it ray GF, and this is the endpoint. Now it technically, you're thinking, well, could I reverse it and do FG and then reverse this symbol? In geometry and in mathematics, normally you don't do that. You start with the point that is the end point. So try to keep that in mind. It's not maybe technically wrong. It shows your understanding, but it's kind of like writing things in order in certain ways that we do things in math. So try to remember that. So number 2, I see the two arrows in either direction. So I know that this is a line. And if I am going to draw how to draw it, I can either do, I'm going to go over here, I'm either going to do HJ, and I'm going to draw this little hat, or I could do JH. That would still be correct as they go on in either direction. So the only one we have left here is segment. And you would name that segment KL with a little line over the top. Okay? So I am going to look at page 456. I'll flash it up here. You are perfectly welcome to get your math book out, but there are some sketches on here that it's really difficult for me to draw because they're actual photos. So I am going to flash this up and we'll talk through, we've already gone through plane, parallel lines, and things like that. What I do want to concentrate on up here is, and I'm going to go like this so you don't see the solution quite as much. Sorry if you did. But if you look at the aerial photo, that means a photo from, I'm sorry about the, there we go, a picture from the air, and here is the drawing that you see. Name two rays from here. And so one possible ray on this would be, there's HG, and you would write that with H being an endpoint and G going in that direction. You could do HL, and it can go in that direction. Somebody asked me once, could I do HJ? Yes, you could, because it exists on this line, but you have to have that arrow, because then it will even go on beyond the L. So you could do HJ, or HL on this same line, or same ray, I should say. Let's see, the second one is name two segments that have G as an endpoint. So I'm going to keep my finger here. I see you could do HG right here. I could do JG right here. And technically, if you wanted to call this an endpoint, K, and not consider everything out, you could do KG, but it has to have the correct hat on the top. You cannot name this as array. Name a line. So if I look at this, you could use the GH line. You cannot use any of these that have an endpoint here. And that's the only line that I see that where there's a line that goes in two directions. Okay, a lot of you who would like to go into architecture and design and things like that are going to be using things like this all the time. Law enforcement, aerial views, setting up a perimeter. Those are also great reasons to use things like this. The last thing I would like to go through, I did draw it with a ruler, is I drew this little diagram down here for you to try. You can go ahead and pause me if you think you get the whole gist of it. What is another way, there's my little diagram I'm referring to write AD, right here, there's A, and this is D. If you can't read it, it is not a B. The B is right here. What is another way to write ray AD and line EA? Okay, the other question is which lines are intersecting and which lines are parallel. Labeling is very important, so I know what you mean on this. So another way to write a ray AD, we're referring to that ray, is, remember I told you you could pick another point on the line, and so for this one it would be ray AE. And the arrow has to go this direction or it will be wrong. What about EA? You could write AE, you could reverse it. That's easy. Or you could refer to AD as long as you mean that you're picking this point and it's going on in both directions. It doesn't matter that it's a sooner point than anything else, as long as you know that it just keeps going in both directions. Again, the hat it wears is very important. Which lines are intersecting and which lines are parallel? Well, let's deal with the intersecting lines. So I know that, and I will accept some symbols in your work. This one isn't technical, but if I'm going to take line AE as my main line, as you see here, it intersects with, and I'm going to use the intersect like this, draw it really thick so it isn't a plus sign. AE intersects with BA, and AE intersects with CD or DC, whichever you'd like to. And as long as you put this hat on, we are talking about the line. Which lines are parallel? There's only two sets of lines here that will never touch as long as they go for infinity in both directions. So that is, I'm going to call it AB. It's not wrong if you do BA, and it's a line. And I'm going to use the parallel, is parallel to, and I believe that is a technical term, CD, or a technical symbol.